Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another session of our sustainability webinar series. This one is on the Audubon Wildlife Habitat Program that's new to Prince George's County. For a little bit about the presenters, we have Kathy Schollenberger and Barry Stahl. They've both been trained as master gardeners and master naturalists. Barry is a retired horticulturist, Mount Rainier tree commissioner, and Chesapeake Natives Inc. board member. Kathy is a retired teacher, a lifelong gardener, and Prince George's Audubon Society board member. Together with the Prince George's Audubon Society board and Aaron Reed Miller, the education manager of Patterson Parks Audubon Center in Baltimore, they have laid the groundwork and provided the leadership for this new program in our area. As a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to them right after the presentation. And I will also be sending out a follow-up email to everyone with additional resources and links. And also this webinar will be recorded and put on the City of Bowie YouTube channel if you'd like to view it later. So without further ado, over to you, Kathy and Barry.
Thank you, Ashley, and good evening, everyone. Kathy's going to get us started.
Okay, I'm Kathy Schollenberger, and together with my husband Barry Stahl, this evening we'll focus on a new way to look at sustaining our planet for future generations of wildlife and humans by creating habitat. We are very pleased to be here. So let's start with the problem. Habitat loss in Prince George's County and everywhere else. Research indicates that loss of wildlife habitat is threatening our ecosystem health. Much of this research has focused on bird decline, so that's where we'll start. Just a word of caution, this can be depressing. It's a bad news, good news story, so bear with me. Let's start with this wood thrush, which, by the way, is the DC state bird. The thrush is a songbird that winters in Costa Rica and flies across the Gulf of Mexico. It sounds like this. You've probably heard it. So this should look familiar. And now it should look even more familiar. This is what our thrush would have seen on its journey once upon a time, about 100 years ago. Lots of natural places to stop, rest, and refuel. This is how it looks now, much less forested, with habitat fragmented, degraded, and sometimes removed. A huge increase in impervious surfaces. This makes finding those places to stop along the way pretty tough for our thrush. Another way to look at the perils of migration nowadays is to view this map of lights at night when most birds migrate. They get lured towards cities, distracted and disoriented by these lights. They circle until exhausted and need a place to land. Hopefully our wood thrush finds a place like this to land, a little oasis of habitat. It doesn't look good for our thrush though. The wood thrush population is declining by almost 2% a year. And all told, 2.9 billion American birds are gone since 1970. These birds are bioindicators. Bird decline is a harbinger of wider environmental woes. And because we're all part of the same food web, the same support system, we can't ignore this. Bird decline tells us that it's time to act. This decline is occurring for numerous reasons. Habitat loss tops the list. Much of what we know about the demise of habitat and the problems it spells for the planet comes from the work of this man, Douglas Tallamy, professor of entomology at University of Delaware. His two most recent books, bringing up, not most recent, there's one even more recent about oaks, but the two that we will refer to are Bringing Nature Home and this book, Nature's Best Hope, a new approach to conservation that starts in your yard. That's his latest book, and it really spells out the vision upon which we've based our program. Talamy starts with the bad news, and it's bad. He paints the picture this way: 95% of our country has been developed. It's been logged, drained, grazed, tilled, and paved. Our rivers have been straightened and dammed, and some no longer even reach the sea. Our air is polluted, our aquifers are dry, our native plant communities have been decimated by imports that really don't belong here. As a result, our natural world has been cut into tiny remnants. So, what's the solution? What's so great about Talamy's research and writing is that he lays out both the problem and the solution. So here it comes. I promised you good news. Heads up. Talamy says we're in dire straits. Can we fix this? And he thankfully says, yes, we can. Here's a quote from his book that describes his vision of a homegrown national park. He writes, what if each American landowner made it a goal to convert half of his or her lawn to productive native plant communities? Even moderate success could collectively restore some semblance of ecosystem function to more than 20 million acres of what is now ecological wasteland. Sounds pretty great. But then you will have some naysayers. We have these garden trolls from the New York Times. The first two are kind of razzing each other about their gardens, but troll 3 has a point. There might be bigger things to worry about than gardening. What we would argue, however, is that it's a great time because in a world that appears to be even more out of control than usual, this is something we can control. We can control our own little piece of property. We don't have to create a petition or lobby our state legislature or get the right person elected. We could just do it. It's kind of revolutionary. Barry is going to tag team with me and talk about the answer to this question.
This question, what will this homegrown national park look like? And the place to start is where we are right now. Mostly, if you look around your community, you'll find homes with a few trees scattered here and there that are planted in lawns with a little bit of shrubbery around them. Your home and your involvement in your community may be very dynamic, but your garden most likely is not. It's a sterile environment, a mostly lifeless environment that's not good for the community and it's not good for you. So we're saying the homegrown national park should look more like this. Our homes should be surrounded by native plants. They should be teeming with life. They should be full of vitality. Grass might not grow very well under trees. Roses might not grow very well under trees, but native shade plants grow very well and can surround our homes. A wildlife garden can look like this. And you'll note there's still room for a patio. It doesn't have to be 100% native, and there has to be room for us to live in and around our homes as well. But we should be sharing our homes with wildlife, with birds, with butterflies, with bees, and providing them with the things that they need. It doesn't have to be a lot of space. Even a small strip alongside the house can provide a benefit to wildlife. Even a container garden can be a small wildlife habitat. That thrush that's passing overhead is looking for a place to rest, a place to get a snack, and it can be as small, as simple as a windowsill, and you're still providing benefit to wildlife. So our aim is to transform an environment like this that's providing little, if any, benefit at all to wildlife, or even to us as humans, into something like this, a place that's both beautiful and functional, that has tremendous diversity offered in its plants and in the things that it attracts the wildlife to our houses. So how do we go about creating this wildlife habitat? What does it take? What are the essential elements that make up wildlife habitat? The principle we follow is to make like Mother Nature. If you look at an unspoiled environment, you'll see that there are layers of vegetation that are in balance and harmony, and very little is needed on our part. But around our homes, we're working as hard as this cartoon man who's mowing his lawn and probably fertilizing it and applying herbicides to keep it green and lush. So wildlife gardeners replace their lawn as much as possible. They replace introduced plants and invasive plants with native trees, native shrubs, and perennials. Again, most homes look like this. Look an aesthetic that goes back several hundred years, back to Europe, and with plants and expansive lawns that surround our homes that are European influenced, and now most recently with lots of Asian plant introductions as well. Now they don't benefit us in the way that native plants do. Native plants require less maintenance. Native plants keep invasive plants out when they're planted densely. They provide a beauty and diversity and a sense of place that says that it's here. The black-eyed Susan is the native plant for Maryland for a reason. It looks right here. It lives here. It's lived here for a million years. And what's more, the benefit of native plants is that they attract beneficial wildlife, built-in biocontrols, so we don't have to apply pesticides. Why are native plants so valuable? Well, 90% of the plant-eating insects, 25% of our native bees, eat only those plants with which they've co-evolved. Milkweed is a well-known example, and the monarch butterfly, but it's not alone. Most insects have a plant relationship with another plant, in many cases, a single plant that they rely upon. Here's an example. You see around many homes, Nandina domestica, an Asian plant, attractive red berries, evergreen foliage. It's in all the big box stores, so it's in around many of our homes. But what kind of benefit is Nandina providing? Zero. There are no caterpillars found on Nandina. Compare that with Vaccinium, our native blueberry. Almost 300 caterpillars choose this as a host plant. And of course, if we're talking about benefit to us, there are blueberries for us to eat and blueberries for us to share with other wildlife. So we're advocating with wildlife planting to replace introduced plants, replace invasive plants with native trees, shrubs, and perennials. And you can look down a list like this that says plant this, not that, and replace plants that are introduced into our landscapes with plants that are native to our landscape. There are other elements, about 5 or 6 others I'll go through, that are involved in having a wildlife habitat. A wildlife gardener doesn't use pesticides or fertilizers. Instead, we rely on the leaf litter. It's right there, just keep it there. Leave the leaves in your garden and you'll have all the fertilizer you'll need. They'll break down and they'll nourish the soil. Beneficial insects are in our gardens if we're not applying pesticides, and they take care of all the insect pests that are needed. Mother Nature, once again, is in balance, is in harmony. Wildlife gardens provide structure, planting densely and in layers. Look at these pictures and you'll see how clumped these plants are. This is so it's much more efficient for pollinators to find what they're looking for. Not planting a single plant here and a single plant there, but massing plants. And look at heights as well. You have canopy trees, you have mid-story trees, shrubs and ground covers. These are all niches that different birds nest in, that different bugs live in. You need to provide this kind of diversity in a wildlife garden. And they also need to be clearly planted so that it doesn't look like a wild space. If you're doing something different as a wildlife gardener than your neighbors are doing, you need to be sending a clear message to them that this is intentional by using edging and paths to clearly designate your beds. Wildlife gardens provide food for birds, pollinators, and other wildlife. And there are many different types of foods that these critters require: berries, nuts and seeds, insects, and nectar. So a diversity of plants provides a diversity of food. And leaving the seeds over winter, leaving berries over winter, provides birds and insects that overwinter with the food that they need. The more native plants that you put in, the more you'll find that you don't need things like bird feeders. Bird feeders are a supplement perhaps, but many birds don't even eat seeds. And they are oftentimes more for us than they are for the birds themselves. A good way for us to look at birds and study birds. But now, for example, we're finding that they may be spreading disease, and the experts are telling us to take down our feeders. We can take down our feeders if we have plenty of food in the garden in the form of plants. And the more plants you have, the more diversity you have, the more you'll attract a diversity of wildlife too. You'll attract turtles and toads and salamanders and be providing food for them as well as other wildlife. Wildlife needs shelter and housing as well, layers of plant material. So wildlife gardens keep dead trees on their property, dead logs, keep snags or standing parts of trees with cavities and crevices that birds will make their homes in, that birds will seek out as protection from predators. All the organic material that you have on your property should be kept for a wildlife garden. It all has multiple uses for different critters. And water on your property is also extremely valuable. So a wildlife garden keeps it as much as possible on site, keeps stormwater management at bay. So rain barrels, rain gardens, bird baths are all very valuable, and you can get help with them through Prince George's County. The Rain Check rebate program will actually pay you and keep your costs down for introducing these water features to your property. And lastly, the wildlife gardener provides safety and safe haven for wildlife. There's no sense to attracting wildlife to your garden only to have them killed. So we advocate keeping your cats inside. Cats kill millions of birds each year. And we advocate treating your windows as well. Another 1 billion birds nationwide are killed each year through crashes, collisions with windows. And lights, as Kathy said, are a big distraction for birds. So keep them off or put them on motion sensors rather than having lights on all over the house. In any case, the wildlife garden is a place like this that provides shelter for escape for birds, that eliminates hiding places where birds can be attacked by predators, and the feeders are kept back if you put out feeders away from the street. With that, I'll turn it back over to Kathy.
So let's talk about what the Audubon Wildlife Habitat Program has to offer. How can it help you create habitat? After all, turning half of your lawn into wildlife habitat is easier said than done. So here's our offer of help. A no-cost, on-site, in-person visit. You might wonder if visits are really necessary. After all, there's an enormous amount of information online. And you might say, can't would-be wildlife gardeners find everything they need online? If you look just at this page, this represents my start of a search for information on bird-friendly gardening on the National Audubon website. And already I had too much to read. There's probably enough information just on the state, county, and National Audubon websites, let alone all the other sites that there are available to us. So not everyone will want or need a visit. This wealth of information online, however, cuts both ways. And although it can be very, very helpful, it can also be overwhelming. So some folks might need a boost to get started. It can be very empowering. So here's the idea of the visit. Its power is that at the center of it is an individual conversation. It's a conversation about a specific outdoor space. This picture shows Barry visiting a specific outdoor space with the owners of that space. It's about their specific set of circumstances and about together developing a specific vision that fits both the homeowners and their space. It's tailored. We've gotten so many emails from people who, for one reason or another, are stuck and need this kind of jump start. People write things like, I just don't know where to start in my yard. All this information is great, but I don't know where to start in my yard. Can you help me make a plan? I don't know how to prioritize. So were you to request a visit, what could you expect? First of all, you and a pair of habitat advisors would do a walkthrough of your property. They would provide you with carefully selected information on wildlife gardening and links to help you manage the wealth of information online. They would help you to set priorities and make a manageable plan for moving forward with a follow-up summary. They would offer themselves to provide further assistance as needed, and finally encourage you to apply for Audubon wildlife habitat recognition when you're ready. It would be a collaborative, ongoing effort. So you might be asking at this point, can we do this? Can we build this homegrown national forest? Or perhaps more to the point, if you're thinking about your own outside spaces, can I do this? We have found that homeowners respond to this endeavor with both great excitement and some trepidation. It requires time, energy, and also some money. So perhaps a little cheerleading is in order. Can we do this? Yes, we can. It's time. We have to do this. That's what Talamy would say. Little by little, yard by yard, we can do this together. I'd like you to listen to another little bit of Doug Talamy wisdom, which I think is very convincing. It's very convincing in his assertion that the time is right and we are on the cusp. He writes, despite the current political climate, I believe we are on the cusp of a new environmental ethic, one that must be adopted, not just in blue states, but in red states as well, not just by tree hugging environmentalists, but by everyone. So things are happening. Here are a couple of examples of further proof that we're on the cusp. On the Maryland state level, homeowners associations beginning in October will no longer be able to require you to plant turf grass or prohibit native plants and wildlife habitat. This is based on a law that was passed that establishes what's essentially a new right to be wildlife friendly. And that's really a big deal because homeowners associations have many restrictions, and much of our land, much of our housing is part of an HOA. Then there are things happening all over Maryland in towns like yours. There are lots and lots of sustainability plans that have goals just like yours, which reads like this: create native landscaping on 300 additional public and private properties to help improve water quality and create new habitats for wildlife. So a lot of us are on exactly the same page. Everyone watching this presentation has the power to make a difference. There are lots of ways to get involved. Whatever you choose to do, you'll be building on work already in progress right here in Bowie. If you have an outdoor space, start to transform it. You might not even know where to start. So you plan a small section at a time. You take a baby step and you see what can happen. Voila. If need be, you get help from a pair of habitat advisors. If you already have wildlife habitat on your property, you're in a different situation. You can always keep improving your habitat, but meantime, you can apply for Audubon wildlife habitat certification and get this lovely sign. It will help you start neighborhood conversation, but it will also give you National Audubon Society creds. Then you use your sign to start conversation with your neighbors. When you're doing this, you're building community. And as Barry mentioned earlier, you'll stick out. So the sign will really help you. It connects you to this national organization and it says, hey, my garden is planful. I'm doing something really important. It also means that you'll become part of this ever-growing network of wildlife-friendly habitat in Maryland. So once you've made some headway on your own property, you've got some wildlife gardening underway, you can start branching out into your community. One thing you can do is divide your own plants and swap, and that's also a way to limit costs. You can team up with your neighbors. If you get your own property to the point where you want to move out into your community, you can branch out into public spaces like this one. Or look, for example, for median strips that have nothing to offer to pollinators and birds, and transform them in this really lovely way. Maybe you're committed to a faith community or a school where you could imagine getting folks interested in creating bird-friendly habitat. Or maybe your place of work has an outdoor spot. Remember, no space is too small. Or perhaps you have gardening or naturalist experience you'd like to put to good use. You can sign up to be trained as a habitat advisor this August and start visiting properties in the fall. I've had many volunteer opportunities in my life, and I have to say that I think this is the most satisfying one I've ever done. I would really, really recommend it. This might look familiar. It's our call for habitat advisors, and it's been posted on your community listserv. So it all starts here, 1 yard at a time. It's nature's best hope. Talamy would say, we don't have a choice, we have to do this. So please find a way to join this movement. Here's how to get in touch. That's it.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
This was awesome. For the people who are tuned in, if you have any questions, now is a really good time to submit them. We don't have any right now, but sometimes when I mention it, people will shoot a few through. So we'll give it a minute just to see. And well, if we don't have any questions, I just want to remind everyone, I will send a follow-up email with a bunch of links and things. Oh, we got one. What happens if you want a vegetable garden?
Go ahead.
All our talk has been about wildlife gardening, but that doesn't mean it's the only gardening that can take place in your garden. A recent study said 70% native is a good number to shoot for. That's the number in which chickadees made their nests in gardens. 40%, no, they moved on. 50%, no. But 70%, they laid their nests and raised their young. So that still leaves you with 30% of your garden where you can grow vegetables, where you can even grow introduced plants. As long as they're not invasive, there's no reason why you can't have plants that are not native that you love. But try to shoot for that number. Try to have a wildlife garden that's 70% native, and use the other parts of your garden for play areas, for socializing, for paths of grass, and vegetable gardening is certainly a worthwhile endeavor.
The same person also asked or noted that birds can be destructive to vegetables. Do you find that to be the case?
It's certainly part of this endeavor is about sharing with nature. There are certainly ways that you can protect things like vegetables and fruits by putting netting over them, by trying to pick them in a timely fashion. But sometimes birds are going to take things that you probably meant for yourself. So you kind of have to do the vegetable garden in that spirit. The other thing that Barry didn't mention is that there are a lot of people who integrate the two. And in some ways that might be a better way to protect some of those things you're worried about, so that you have lettuce in amongst your native ground cover, and your tomatoes might be integrated into the rest of your garden. That might be an interesting way to look at it. But you definitely are going to lose some things.
Sorry, realized I was muted. This question, does the shared property near the street in Bowie allow for planting natives? I know we can't plant trees in that area. No, that's Bowie property. Although you could always inquire with the city forester about efforts. He's very open to expanding what he plants, but it's just a conversation you have to have with him. There is, there's guidelines he has to follow for the whole of the city. So
in most of the communities we've been working with, the town or city or county, even if it's their property, is very happy to have homeowners develop that in a good way. They're not using that property, but of course you do want to be sure that you're on good footing before you proceed.
Right.
And then if you don't have neighbors that want to do this, can you do it at a minimal cost initially?
Yes, I think one of the things that, one of the reasons that we started this Habitat Advisor Program is because, as we said several times, it can be overwhelming. So the idea would be to start small and to therefore not invest an enormous amount of money at the beginning. Barry talks about planting densely. If you can afford 20 plants, you put those 20 plants in a small area, and that's what you do this season. And then you do another chunk the next season, so you spread it out. We're really trying to work in the neighborhoods where we're visiting on connecting up people who are doing wildlife gardening, so that that kind of sharing that can cut down on costs can go on. And there certainly are people in Bowie. We have 9 people on our list for September visits who are Bowie residents. So I think as that community of people who are interested in this grow, then you'll find more and more that you'll be able to divide plants and share them. There are also, in both the fall and spring, plant sales at various places, and those are generally reasonably priced. So there are ways to make it work. You can also divide things within your own garden. If you have rudbeckia, for example, you could probably end up with a large patch of rudbeckia, or rudbeckia in lots of different places, because they're native plants like that are, when you put them where they belong, they're in the soil that they like, and they're going to really succeed. So it's a slow process, but taking it a little at a time means that you can do it without incurring enormous cost.
Oh, of course, all the kids are out. So disclaimer to everyone who's live. I just can't hold them off anymore. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. This was very informative, and I can't wait to post it and get it live and send the links to the Green Team and the Environmental Advisory Committee and have them continue to spread the word. And I will again send a follow-up to everyone who registered with resources and things that you all have sent me. And I'll put your contact information in there.
So Ashley, maybe we could just add that if you put our contact information, that people should feel free to send us questions.
That's great. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
All right, have a nice, oh wait, I see something in the Q&A. Let's check. Oh, just saying thank you. All right, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.